Okay, trying this again. This is the second video for the actual research paper itself. And in this one, I'm going to focus on the citations inside your paper and using the information that you found from your research inside the body of your paper. So one of the things I want to start with really quickly is if I'm going here to the guidelines for the project, just very briefly talking about the difference between the sources and the citations, because I know that's something that confuses people the first time they're doing this. And so I'm in the middle, literally right now, of updating these requirements. So like this used to say 5 sources. I changed it to 3. The rest of this I haven't edited yet, but I'll be cutting down the length a little bit and all that. Anyway, though, so the sources is referring to the actual places that you're getting your information from. So in the past, those probably would have been books or articles inside of encyclopedias and reference books and things like that. Now, it's probably more likely going to be articles that you found online in the databases. But really any place that you learned your information. So whether it was a documentary that you saw on the History Channel or an actual physical book or an article, all sorts of different things can be sources. An interview with an expert or a person who was an eyewitness or something like that, those can be sources. I don't have any requirements that you use different types of sources other than I, to the very best of your ability, want to make sure these are coming from credible sources. So if at all possible, from the library databases or books from the library. If you are using articles from elsewhere on the internet, just again, if at all possible, talk to me first, but also use your best judgment as far as if it is a credible website. So the second thing, like I said, that people tend to get confused about there are the citations. And it says 10 here. I might probably adjust that depending on what we do with the length of the paper. But just right now, let's focus on what the citation is. And so that is where in the paper you're actually using information from those sources. So as you saw, the number for the citations was bigger than the number for the sources. It used to be double. I might keep that ratio. I might keep it to, say, if you had 3 sources, have 6 citations. That scares me a little bit because I don't want you to think about the citations as something to only have a minimum of. As I mentioned in the previous video, the citations aren't like a speed limit kind of thing where you're just doing it to be in compliance and you're just doing it to follow the rules. I want you to look at the positive side of having citations in your paper as a way of making yourself look more credible and informed. So you are not just making up this information. This isn't just coming from your opinion. This is based on research that you've done, on information that you found from experts and from reliable sources. And so the citations are like your way of showing the world that this is work that you've done in finding this information and putting it all together. And you should be proud of that. So yes, it is important that this paper shows some originality in your thought, but I want you to think about the originality as being how you're putting it all together and what you're taking away from it, not a test of, well, they should have already known that. That's Mr. Andrews' job to see that you remember when the war started and how many soldiers died or what year that amendment passed or something like that. This is not the time to prove that you knew this all already. Yes, you've learned it now. You're showing us that you've learned it now. But this is the time to show us that you got this information from good, reliable sources. And that's what the citations do. So without getting carried away, think about the more the better with having the citations in there. The more often that you're telling me where you're getting that information from, the more likely I am to feel like I can trust what your thesis is, because you're backing it up with all of this evidence. So clearly here in my little sample, I am dealing with a fictional premise for funsies. But the way the citations look is the way that they should look if you were dealing with real information, and well, with nonfiction information. And there's a really good guide here also from Purdue OWL, the online writing lab from Purdue University, about how to use information in your paper, because there's different ways to do it, and the different ways are appropriate for different pieces of information. So you might have an exact quote, which hopefully you remember means you're going to need to have quotation marks around it, and you're going to say word for word what's in there. And just as a little tip, probably don't want to do too much of that, and you probably don't want the quotes to be too long. The other thing that you'll probably do a lot more of is paraphrasing, where you're taking the information from that source, but you're putting it in your own words. A really important thing to remember, though, is, again, both to protect yourself from plagiarism accusations and also to make yourself look more credible. You're still going to want to do the citation here, where you're telling us whose idea that originally was. And then, of course, there's the summarizing, where you're taking a lot of information, boiling it down to the most important details or the most important relevant parts for your purposes. And again, still putting it in your own words. So there's a little bit of paraphrasing that goes along with that. And so this has lots of information about how to do it, when to do it, has some examples and things like that. Like I said, though, you're going to want to have a variety. You're not going to want to do what we talk about, quote bombing, where you have just a big, long quote just dumped in the middle of your paper. That's not good writing. And it is very rarely interesting or compelling writing. So in this case, I would say this is kind of more of a summarizing situation, where I'm taking probably a few pages worth of things that happen in the story and pulling out just the most essential facts to support this this claim that I'm making here, that invisibility is a better form of defense than a weapon would be. And so what I would do if I'm doing that kind of thing, I'm going to put in parentheses the author's name. And in this case, because it's a big old book, page numbers. I have an example here of doing a paragraph number if you were using a short article. With shorter articles, I would say that would be my suggestion for doing your citation there. If it's a really long article and you don't want to count all those paragraphs, I would suggest doing a print preview. Don't actually print out the stuff. There's no need for that. But if you do the print preview, you can hopefully, if it's not too hard, find where that information was and give me a page number. Your print preview might not be identical to what my print preview would be, but I understand that we're working under unusual circumstances here. And the goal is just to make it as easy as possible for the reader to find that information if they wanted to go look for it later. And again, I know this sounds like crazy talk here, but again, it's not just a matter of me wanting to check up on you. Yes, that might happen, where I am looking to see, oh, that doesn't sound right, or something like that. But a lot of times, and again, I know this is nerdy teacher talk here, but if I'm reading one book, here I even have an example right here. If I'm reading one book, she might have some information that she's using about a particular idea, and I want to learn more about that. So I'm going to actually go in the back of the book and look at her, look at her works cited. And this is a different format. So it's actually called the references, but works cited is what we call it in MLA format, and find out where that article came from, or where I could get a hold of that book, that kind of thing. So again, this isn't just a protecting yourself from plagiarism thing, although it also does that. So here's another example of almost the exact same thing here, where again, I'm putting the information in my own words, I'm condensing it down, so I'm doing some summarizing and some paraphrasing. But if you notice here that the author's name is not in the parentheses, it's because I already mentioned her name in the actual sentence itself. So this is the kind of thing you don't want to do all the time, because if every one of your sentences says, according to this person, blah, 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 according to that person, blah, 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 it will really quickly start to sound like you are just throwing out what other people are saying. So again, you want to mix it up. You want to use a variety of these different things. But my kind of suggestion for this type of thing, where you say according to and then give the expert author's name, those are really good for when that author is someone whose name has what we call cachet, when that is an author who you think people have heard of, and you think people trust their credibility, and would look at as being an authority and an expert, and someone who, if they agree with your point, or if you're using their opinion to support yours, or their statement to support yours, it's going to strengthen it. So this is, according to Einstein, according to Stephen Hawking, according to Martin Luther King, according to Gandhi. These are the kind of people where that's going to lend support to your position, if someone who we recognize as an important, knowledgeable figure agrees with you. Not trying to throw just regular old historians and regular old scholars under the bus. But according to Jennifer Fletcher, y'all probably don't know who Jennifer Fletcher is. So if it's somebody that you don't think is going to have a widely recognized name, then maybe just keep them in the parentheses here, and just give the information, still give them credit, but you don't have to front load it here, where it's really emphasizing how important that person is. This next sentence shows, again, using a direct quotation. And notice that I've done what we call embedding the quotation, where, like I said, I'm not just throwing a quotation in there by itself, but I am incorporating it into the other things that I'm saying, and I'm kind of sandwiching it in here with my own words. It's not the greatest writing ever, but it's still a step above just throwing the quotation in there without introducing it in some way. So again, I might say additionally in, I don't know if it was the Fellowship of the Ring, or probably the, that's not going to be correct, but again, I'm providing that context, and I am keeping it in the flow of the rest of the paper. And then this last one here, again, is just another one of those paraphrased or summarized examples, but it's showing you one way to do a paragraph number instead of a page number. So like I said, on the Purdue OWL website, it has very, very thorough information about your in-text citations, everything else for that. But for instance, if you used an encyclopedia article as one of your sources, a lot of times, is where you'd want to look here. So like I said, usually the standard is that you use the author's last name. However, if you used, like I said, something like an encyclopedia article, it might not provide the author's name. So it gives you examples here where there isn't a known author. So in that case, you'd use the title of the article. And like I said, it has all kinds of, like every possible case, like down to, if you keep scrolling, like quoting from the Bible and things that have multiple authors, or the flip side of it, if you have multiple sources from the same author. In this particular case, because of how short your papers are, I would be careful about having too much from the same author, because again, if in some weird situation it turns out that that author was maybe not entirely credible after all, and you're getting information from them and it's like a higher percentage of your information, then that's even more concerning. But again, all these different scenarios are covered in here. I don't want you guys stressing too much about the formatting. This is a learning experience, and it's not something that I'm going to be taking like loads of points off of. As long as it looks like you've made an honest effort to do it correctly, you should do fine on the rubric. It's not going to be like, oh, well, you put the comma here and the period there, and it's supposed to be the other way around. Again, Purdue OWL will have all the details, but the one thing I will say is that the period should go after the parentheses, only because I'd like to make sure it's obvious to you that the citation is part of the sentence, so it goes before the period. Again, I'm not going to take off points if you put the period in the wrong place. I just want you to be thinking about the fact that this is part of the sentence. It's not just this alien thing that you're slapping on later. So I'll talk more, again, not too much, but a little bit about the formatting in the final video for this. And I hope this was helpful, but if you have more questions, please know that you can reach out to me. I have video tutorials scheduled, and you can call and email. As always, stay safe. Thank you.